Greetings and salutations. Thanks for clicking on the video. This is the first time that I have done a formal Q&A video, and see a lot of other people doing that who are posting things on YouTube about Linux, so I figured I would give it a shot. A big part of my morning is going through all of the comments that I get on my videos, plus correspondence through EzeeLinux and emails and things like that. So I figured this morning I got some really good questions, and I thought I would actually answer them here in a video. And the first question comes from Miguel. It's in reference to the video how to use HTOP. And he says, I honestly don't see a need for swap anymore if you're using more than 8 gigabytes of RAM. What do you think? This is a good question, and this is one that there's a lot of haranguing about on the internet in different forums, because it doesn't there's not really a clear answer, but I can give you my opinion, okay, and what I have found to be true. I do a lot of installs. I've done a lot of installs over the years, and every time that I do an install, I always include a swap partition or a swap file, and it really doesn't make any difference whether we're talking about Linux or Windows. And the reason why I do that is that a lot of the system engineers that I have heard from have always said, yeah, you really do need a swap file even if you have a lot of memory. For those of you who are not real familiar with what swap is and what it does, the swap file or swap partition, depending on how it's set up on your machine, is virtual memory. It is memory that the system can revert to if the physical memory in the machine runs out. So essentially the memory manager, what it does is that if it starts getting a lot of requests for RAM and it's starting to run out of page space, it takes some of the pages that have been sitting in RAM but have not been accessed in a long time, and it throws them over on the hard drive. And what that allows the system to do is free up that physical RAM in such a way so that things that do need a lot of reading and writing and back and forth going on actually have access to the physical RAM. The problem with that is that if you have a lot of things that are swapped out and then the computer calls on them, reading from a hard drive, even an SSD, is slower than accessing the physical RAM in the computer. Therefore, it will slow the system way down. This was an important feature back in the days when computers, if you had 256 megabytes of RAM in the early days of like Windows or multitasking Linux with desktops, you had a lot of RAM on the system. And so therefore it would create a swap space that was a lot bigger than the RAM. So if you actually ended up taking it up, then the system would keep running. It wouldn't just freeze up and throw up a message on the screen that says, oops, I'm out of memory. So these days it may seem like, well, I really don't need this because, hey, I got 8 gigabytes of RAM and I don't even ever push the system that hard. Why should I take a piece of hard drive space and give it to the system to swap it if it doesn't need it? Some programs use the swap space independently of the system. So if you happen to be running one of those programs, and this is like regardless whether it's Linux or Windows, and it needs that swap space and it doesn't get it, the program might go crazy. It might not run properly, it might crash, it might do whatever. Which programs those are and whether the typical Linux desktop user runs them, I don't really know. I'm not a developer, so I was just create a swap file to be safe on that front. Also, if you ever want to hibernate the system, that means to shut it down but have it remember exactly where it was, then you have to have enough swap space for the system to be able to store everything that's in memory. So a good general rule of thumb is to make the swap space just a little bit bigger than the physical memory you have in the machine. By maybe like 10 or 20 megabytes bigger is enough, okay? And if you are running a machine that has very low-end hardware, for instance, there are still some machines that are out there running 512 megabytes of memory, half a gig. And if in that case, what I do is make a pretty large swap partition for that. I'll put like a 2.5 gigabyte partition on that machine. And that way, the machine may slow way, way down, but at least it will keep running. If I just left it where there was half a gig of memory in it, these days, if you have any sort of desktop environment and you open up a browser, you've blown out half a gig of memory. It doesn't matter how lightweight the system is, especially when you put in system overhead that needs access to that memory as well. So yes, these systems will actually swap a lot, but it will work. And believe it or not, there's a couple of EzeeLinux clients that I'm maintaining that have systems that have that little bit of memory in it, and we're running Linux on it, and it works. So yes, you do need to create a swap file. Whether one of the things that you can do in Linux that's really cool, and this is important for those of you who have solid-state hard drives, is you can adjust, there's a parameter that you can adjust in the system called swappiness. So when you install Ubuntu and Linux Mint and a lot of other distributions of Linux, the swappiness is usually set about at 60, which roughly means that 60% of the physical memory in the machine needs to be taken up before the system will start swapping data out. But that's a really general way of saying that, because swappiness, actually, there's a lot of factors that go into it. And you're basically just kind of changing the thresholds at which the memory manager will start using the swap file. So it's not hard and fast that it's like, oh, it's at 60%, I'm going to start using it. And what I do with SSDs is I'll go ahead and create the swap partition, but then I will tell the system to have really low swappiness. I'm talking about setting it to like 10 or 15, which is a really low number, which essentially means that the system is going to have to use up 90% of the physical memory before it actually starts to use the swap partition. It's a concern with SSDs, solid-state drives, because, of course, swap is a lot of reading and writing very quickly, and writing to an SSD is what, over time, will kill it. So some people are like, I don't know whether I want to put swap on it. When I built my machine that had all SSDs in it, what I did was put a spinning drive in it for data storage, and then I put the swap file or the swap partition on that drive. So even if my machine actually goes to use the swap partition, it's not using the SSD. It's using a physical spinning drive, which would slow the system down, but that particular machine also has 8 gigabytes of RAM. The swappiness is set to 10, and it has a huge swap file to deal with, so it probably will actually never use the swap partition. So that is my opinion on swap. Yes, you do need to have it, and yes, it doesn't matter what operating system you're on, you should set aside some swap. One of the things that you can do is that if you're never going to hibernate the machine and you're not worried about that, or you're not worried about recovering memory in case the system crashes, because that's another thing that the system uses swap for, is that if the system crashes and totally goes down, there's a mechanism in there that dumps all of the memory over to the swap, and there's about 6 people on the planet who would know how to read that swap partition, what's in there, and figure out what was wrong with the computer. So if you're not concerned about that, and you're not concerned about hibernating it, you can make a smaller swap space. So if you have 8 gigabytes of RAM, throw the system like 2 gigs of swap, and it should run really good. I just don't think having no swap file at all makes the system slightly unstable. So there's a lot of reasons to do that. So let's move on to the next question, because I kind of rambled on about that. All right, this is actually part of a comment. I abridged it here for the video on the Perfect Linux distro. Amandeep is a longtime subscriber, and I've talked to him before. And he raised an issue here that I have not discussed in videos, so let's do that now. Can you tell me or guide me about the best way to upgrade Ubuntu 14 to 15.10 using an ISO image of 15.10. I made a bootable USB of 15.10 and boot from it, and the machine previously installed with Ubuntu 14, and I upgraded to 15 using the bootable USD, but I had many problems like missing programs. I cut programs off there when I cut and paste this comment over, excuse me. All right, the answer to this question is what I finally found out, because I asked him exactly what was going on, is that what he did was he had Ubuntu 14.04 running, and he put the Ubuntu 15.10 USB stick in. And what Ubuntu will do when you want to reinstall Ubuntu over top of Ubuntu, if it's a newer release, excuse me, is it will offer to upgrade in place. And what it essentially tries to do is to reinstall the distribution into the system folders, leaving your home folder alone, keeping all your data. And then what it will try and do is once that new distribution is installed, it will try and restore all of the programs that you had installed on the last version. Linux is peculiar in that when you move from one version to the next, so let's say that you're running Ubuntu 14.04 and you install a bunch of packages for it, and you actually archive those packages. If you upgrade to Ubuntu 15.10 or 16.04 when it comes out, and you try and install those packages that were intended for Ubuntu 14.04, it ain't going to work. Every time that they do a new version of Ubuntu, all of the programs in the repositories need to be recompiled for that new version. This is one of the reasons that we have like Arch Linux out now that is on a rolling release, that we're not going to have to do this, because this is a big pain in the butt for the maintainers. Every time they do a new release, everything has to be recompiled. Anybody who's maintaining a PPA for Ubuntu, they have to recompile their software for the new one, make sure it works with the new version. This is a big pain in the butt. In a rolling release, they don't do that. They throw it up there, and that's it. That's what you got. So when new stuff comes along, they, just put the package in there. You update it on your computer, not a problem. But anyway, so the system essentially has to reinstall every piece of software you put on the machine. It usually will not connect up PPAs that you had connected. It never can find those. Then it can't find some dependencies in some packages sometimes that the others. This just doesn't work very well. I've tried to do this. The in-place upgrade for Ubuntu doesn't work very well. The solution here is to, if you really, really want to move to a new version of Ubuntu, it's like I told Amandeep here, I said, look, why not stay with 14.04, wait until 16.04 comes along, then wait a couple of months after that to make sure it's nice and stable. So you're looking at maybe having to upgrade in the fall of 2016, okay? Which is one of the reasons why Ubuntu came up with the LTSs to begin with, was to avoid this. Ubuntu releases a new version every 6 months, and each version is supported for 9 months. So the LTS gives you time so you don't have to reload every 6-8 months. So take advantage of the LTS system. There's really not that much difference between Ubuntu 14.04 and 15.10 for the average user. It's just, yes, there's some updated and upgraded software in there, but it's not a huge difference. So stick with what you got. Anyway, back to the whole upgrade thing. The best thing to do is to back up all your data and reinstall if you're going to do that. This is true no matter what version of Linux you're running. There are tricks where, like, you can take your you can put your home folder in a separate partition. I've talked about that in past videos. And then you can reinstall over top of the system partition and then reinstall all the software. Yes, you can do that. The honest truth is, I very rarely ever do it. when I actually want to reload a machine, I want to reload a machine. I end up just starting over. So these days, a lot of the time, like when I installed Manjaro on my laptop, I just let Manjaro partition the disk. It made one big happy partition for the system, the home folder, and everything. I don't care. I got it backed up. The next time that I want to reload that machine, which might be never, because Manjaro is a rolling release. In other words, this release will probably work until the hardware fails. I don't have to do that anyway, so why should I have to bother with having this different home and system partition? I didn't even mess with it. Now, on Ubuntu-based systems, I do the separate partitions, though, because you know, like I said, you can do a manual in-place upgrade. If you know how to do that, that can work pretty slick. The automatic upgrades don't work. So my advice is think about it before you jump to another version, and then just plan on reinstalling, starting over, because it makes for a better system. And before I move on from this question, I have to mention that Linux Mint has changed the way they do their versioning with Linux Mint 17. So in the case of Mint, there is an in-place upgrade to go from 17.1 to 17.2, 17.3. This is not a full system reinstall when they do that. We're just swapping out some applications. So it's really not that big a deal to move from 17.1 to 17.2 in that whole thing, because they're trying to address this issue of in-place upgrades in the Linux world right now. And I really like Linux Mint's solution to that. The current version of Linux Mint 17.3, that's going to run for the next until 2019. If you want to move to 18, you're going to have to reinstall, because now we're talking about a major jump, because the 17 series of Linux Mint is based on Ubuntu 14.04, and the 18 series will be based on 16.04. If you don't need PPAs, and you're not worried about using the PPA system, I would strongly suggest that you check out Linux Mint Debian, because Linux Mint Debian is a rolling release. You install it once, you put all the software you want on it, and then every time you update it, you got the latest stuff. So that's an option from Linux Mint as well. They have a rolling release option. Arch Linux is rolling release. Manjaro is rolling release. OpenSUSE has new rolling release. Fedora is talking about going with a rolling release option. This is the direction that everybody's going. So until we get there, maybe Ubuntu will somewhere down the road drop the 6-month cadence of releases and go to a rolling release. I personally would like to see them make that option available. We'll see what happens. Okay, so I hope I answered that question. Probably said too much. Okay, last one we're going to do as an official question here. Nice video, but I have a question that's off topic for the video. This comes from VG, and it's one that's from 5 days ago, but I actually just found it this morning. Okay, let's see. Nice video, but I have a question that's off topic for this video. I use Ubuntu 15.10, even use the LTS, but every time I boot up, there is a pop-up saying there was a critical system error, so should I use Linux Mint 17.3? Well, I kind of like Linux Mint right now. It's kind of become my favorite distribution, so if you want to go to 17.3, it certainly wouldn't bother me. Sip of coffee for dramatic impact. No, if you want to use Ubuntu and you install it and you see all of these little things that pop up, because this does happen and I get questions about it all the time, let me explain what's going on there. Ubuntu has a system that is turned on by default that allows you to send automatic bug reports back to Canonical, which is the company that develops and distributes Ubuntu. And these reports help the developers to know what's wrong with the system and what's causing problems. That's all great and it's all good, and that's not a problem with that. Now, this is anonymous data, so when you send these reports back, the only thing it knows is what the hardware layout on your system is and what crashed. So if you want to do this to help them out, there's not a problem here. But the thing is that the system itself is, in my opinion, oversensitive. So it'll come up and say that there is a critical system error, and the error that you're looking at is not critical at all. It could have very well been that you were running a program, the last time you used the computer, mind you, that you were running a program and the program crashed, or for some reason or other you closed it and it didn't save all its data. In other words, it had a hard crash. And then it puts that on the system log. The next time you boot the computer, it says that it's had a critical failure. I've seen it do that. And you know for a fact, no, that's not the problem. I had to force quit the program. And so that's what that was about. Or you could have it where Pulse Audio, which is a service that runs in the background that takes care of your audio, or Compiz, which is your window manager in Ubuntu, that they crash and then the system automatically restarts them, which actually happens all the time with background services. And then it'll report this as a critical system error. That is not a critical system error. The system did what it was supposed to do. Compiz or Pulse Audio stopped working and it said, hey, restart that. Bam. So you get all these messages. Now, if you have an Ubuntu system that really has problems, then what you'll get is that you'll see 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 of these pop up real fast. It'll be like boop, 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 because a bunch of things are messed up. If you have one error that happens all the time, sometimes you can use these to your advantage, because if you click details, what it will do is it will give you a list of everything in other words, it'll tell you exactly what program it was that crashed. And a lot of the times reinstalling that program will help. So if you see that you're getting these messages and you click on the detail and it says what process caused the problem, and that process is Pulse Audio, then what you can do is you can actually reinstall Pulse Audio from like Synaptic Package Manager, and when you do that, it clears it up, because it may have been a problem that happened when the program was installed. Something didn't go in exactly right. It's not quite working the way it should. So there is an advantage to having it, but it's also annoying. And for new users who are not tech savvy and don't understand, they get this message that says, there's something really wrong with the system, man. This is junk. I'm not going to play. I'm not going to use this. This is garbage. I'm going back to Windows. So Ubuntu really needs to work on the sensitivity of these things, because it says it's a critical system error no matter what error it is. Good news. You can turn it off. If it just annoys you and your system seems to work just fine and you don't have any major issues, but you're still getting these things, then you can go to Search and Security and just tell it that you don't want to send any reports back to Ubuntu, and it goes away. So that's what that is. Hopefully Ubuntu will work on that as time rolls on. Okay. And somebody's going to have to go answer the door, and it's not going to be me. Because I'm in the middle of a video, and I don't have time to redo it. Thank you very much, person who's going to answer the door. One last thing I wanted to talk about before we close out this video is a little problem that I'm having with EzeeLinux, something that I've noticed here. So for those of you who are considering contacting me through the EzeeLinux page, let me explain how this works just to make sure that you understand. If you come here and you click Contact Us, and this page at some point is going to need updating, but if you click Contact Us, that means open up the Contact Us page, please. Talking to the browser. This package, is it for me? Oh, okay. If you open up this page, you fill out this form, you send me the information, and then what I will do is I will send you back an email. And the email will come from badeditproductions@gmail.com, which is my email address, and I don't care who anybody knows it. And what I have happening is that a lot of people will actually send me an inquiry, and then I email them back, and I never hear from them again. I think what's happening is that it's going into their spam folder. So if you are one of those people who would like to inquire, about EzeeLinux, and you fill out the contact form, make sure that you look for an email from badeditproductions@gmail.com. That's going to be me, okay? So that's how this works. I don't like calling people out of the blue. I ask for your phone number when you fill out the contact form, but I don't want to just call you up, you know what I mean? Because it's like, I'd rather do it in an email or a chat somewhere and say what would be a good time to call so we can set this up. And I do like to do an interview, a consultation with people who are interested, because then that helps me to understand what kind of hardware you have and what you're expecting from your hardware, that sort of thing. So that's usually the way I work. I'd like to set up a time to talk, and then I can take that information and I can go off and do a little research on your computer, and then we'll get back together again to do the actual install if you decide that's what you want to do. So I just wanted to point that out for anybody who is interested in EzeeLinux. And you don't have to fill out this contact form. You can send me a message through Facebook at EzeeLinux, EzeeLinux, the Facebook page, and I'm not going to load it because this browser works really slow on this machine when I'm recording video. And yes, I am doing video on the old E-machine. I'm starting to use this thing more and more. I love the XFCE desktop. It lets me actually do some things with this old computer. I think it's kind of fun, to tell you the truth. I think it's kind of funny. I'm running this 10-year-old computer, and I got a comment from somebody yesterday and said, why does anybody care about 10 or 15-year-old hardware? It's a fluke that it's running anyway. I'm like, there are people out here that actually take care of their stuff, and they have this hardware. Why not put it to use? It's great that Linux will actually support it and make it run, I can have upgraded software on a 10-year-old machine. That's cool. I call that beating the system. Alright, gang, that's it for this video. Check out EzeeLinux on the web, check out EzeeLinux on Facebook, and take a look at Freedom Penguin. We'll talk again soon.